to the Thrive Leadership Forum. My name is Hazel Evans. I am the founder of Highland Valley Digital and the co-founder of the Napa Global Institute. My next speaker brings a rare combination of wisdom, wit, and hard-earned perspective to the stage. Please welcome Cynthia Kay, a nationally recognized business leader, award-winning communicator, and founder of Cynthia Kay & Co., a top-tier media production company that has been thriving for the last 35 years. She's advised Fortune 100 giants, partnered with cutting-edge startups, and navigated the gritty realities of small business leadership from the inside out. Simply put, Cynthia's seen it all, and she knows what it really takes to build, sustain, and sometimes let go. A former investigative journalist with more than 30 awards to her name, Cynthia is also a three-time author, frequent contributor to entrepreneur.com, and a respected advocate for small business at the national level. Her books, including Small Business Big Success and Stop Wishing, Stop Whining, and Start Leading, reflect her signature no-nonsense style, insightful, practical, and deeply human. She doesn't just talk about business, she talks about the people behind it and the emotional weight that comes with being a leader. Today, Cynthia invites us into one of the most personal and powerful questions business leaders can face. Should you stay or should you go? The emotional crossroads of the business leader. So whether you're scaling fast, hitting a plateau, or just quietly wondering what's next, this is the conversation for you. So get ready for an honest, unfiltered, and refreshingly grounded take on the decisions that define not just your business, but your life. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia Kay.
Oh, Hazel, I am so delighted to be with you, and congratulations on this terrific event that you're doing.
Thank you, Cynthia. It's great to have you, and it's just such a great topic to talk about because we have all been there, be it a job, a business, a situation. It can be a life event or it can be a work event, but we've all had that moment to say, should I stay or is it time to go? So tell me a little bit about, before we dig into that, your journey, and then also how did we come to think about this as the next topic that we would share?
Well, thank you for the question. I've had a number of occasions in my life where I've had to consider this. You mentioned that I started as a broadcast journalist, and I spent 13 and a half wonderful years in broadcasting, and then came to that place where I realized it wasn't for me anymore, and that I could, well, and truth be told, you're no one until someone fires you. And I did get fired, but I had done so well in broadcasting. And at that point, I had offers from other stations. I could have gone and worked and done the same thing over again. And I thought to myself, is this really what I want to do? Is it time for me to go and do something else? And that's when I actually decided to start my business. And so that was kind of leaving at a time when I was doing well and choosing to, in many ways, take a step back financially, to take a step back and start to create something again. And so that was something that that was one of the key points. Over the years, I've had a lot of points in the business where I had struggled with, do I stay? Do I go? Is it time for me to leave? And this is not uncommon. All business owners do. But along about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a strategy in place for an exit. Due to the illness of an employee, that strategy kind of went away and I had to recreate it. And I thought again, do I stay? Do I go? And I began putting down signs. And I really did this for myself. What are the signs that I'm seeing that I ought to stay? What are the signs I'm seeing I should go? And then I would weight it, and I'd go back and look at it. Well, many years down the road now, 3 or 4 years, I've decided it's time for me to move to a new challenge. And I'm working on how I'm going to create that challenge and what I'm going to do with it. And so, what I want to do is share with people what it is that we need to think about, because they teach us to be business people,
Mhm.
right? To use our reasoning, to look at the facts. But when it comes to something as critical as this decision, I would argue that emotion comes into play, and you have to pay attention to the emotions.
I agree with that. I think throughout all of my career, I've had many moments of do I stay or do I go? And it is largely tied to the emotional feeling of sometimes for me personally, it was, am I growing? Am I
Yes.
participating? Is there joy? What am I doing to pay it forward? So many personal feelings. What are the things that you think about? Are
Mm,
those the right triggers? Is how do you even know if you're at that point? I mean, there's a gut feeling, but what
mhm.
else is there, Cynthia?
Well, and having done this a few times, a number of years ago, someone came in and tried to buy my business, and I looked at it and I just wasn't ready. But as you look at it, there's a few signs. When you still love what you do, when you are excited to get up in the morning and go out and take on the challenge, when you've built a great team and you love working with them, I think it's hard to leave. But there are other signs on the opposite side. I don't know about you, and you talk to so many business owners. I'm sure you got some really great insight in this, but I run into people who say, you know, I just, I just don't love it anymore. And I go, well, why aren't you doing something about it? Either reignite the passion or go. You have options. So many people feel stuck. But when you don't have that passion for your business, it becomes very obvious to your employers, to your
Mhm.
customers, to your family, to all the people around you. So I think passion for me is like one of the key things. But
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of other things. And this one is this may sound silly, but I call it your thick skin is getting thinner. You know, it used to be that things would roll off you when something didn't go well, you'd go, oh, well, we can get past that. But as time goes on, when things start to wear on you and you start to become annoyed, and you
Mm,
become annoyed at little things, and you become annoyed at customers, you become annoyed at employees, even your best ones, you have to start to think about what is it? What has changed? And what is it that, is really kind of niggling at me and
mm.
maybe giving me a sign that I need to look at some other options? I mean, those are just a couple of them. There's more.
That's true. That's so fascinating. And you're right, I do speak to a lot of people in the business that I do, and many of them are at that pivot point, and some start out almost at that pivot point where they're
Yes.
looking for a new team to operationalize and grow the business because they have the idea, but not the passion to take it through. It's not their dream. It's not the
Mhm.
thing they want to talk about and brag about and sort of sell every day.
I'll
Thinking of
tell you a funny story if I could. My
yeah.
dad was a businessman. He was a CPA by background, but actually went into the dry cleaning business with his two brothers.
Mhm,
I have never seen anyone so passionate about dry cleaning, about getting a spot out and being able to make customers happy. Now, he was also very clear when he said, honey, you need to follow your own heart. You don't need to go into the business. But my dad taught me a really important lesson. He said, do what's in your heart, and you
mhm.
will not ever feel like you're working. And for him, it was dry cleaning.
Yeah,
but and he loved it. It's
yeah.
whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, that is so true. My dad did something similar. He gave me two tips in life, and he said, always manage your money separately from any other person. You're never going to be dependent on another person.
Hmm.
And always do the job that brings you joy because it will never feel like work.
I think our dads were very smart.
Yeah, they definitely were. You touched on something earlier where I think it's in the should I go phase. You
Hmm.
mentioned a great team. You mentioned the people.
Hmm.
I have met some entrepreneurs who really want to leave, but don't want to leave their great team. They don't want to feel like they've let them down by leaving, but they
Yes.
really need to leave for their own, health or for their own reasons.
Hmm.
What should they think about when
Uh-huh.
going through that decision or that process?
Well, that's a really tricky one. And what I would tell you is, let me flip it around a little bit. Sometimes when people don't want to leave the team, it's because they have not defined their next adventure and those new people who will become a part of their lives.
Mhm,
And so they are clinging to that team. But teams are a snapshot in time. And I think it's important to remember that those teams are constantly growing and changing and evolving. And so as they change, you also will change.
mhm,
I mean, I can tell you the way I interact with my team today is very different than the way I interacted with them when they were a little earlier in their careers. They are now people who are accomplished. They are people who are well grounded and they're competent. And frankly, they're in that phase of their life. But I also see myself as someone who loves change. I love the new adventure. I don't want to do what I did last year or 2 years ago. And so you have to balance it. And I don't think that leaving the team means that you have to cut yourself off from your team. I'm working on my fourth book. And in the fourth book, Should You Stay or Should You Go is the working title of it. I've interviewed a number of business owners from around the country. And one business owner in particular has been gone 7 or 8 years from their business, and they are still very close to their team.
yeah.
So it doesn't have to be that you leave the team. You're going to interact with them in different ways.
Mhm.
And you're going to see them in different ways.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it has to be a divorce.
Yeah, that is so true. I also talk to people about your next act, your next act. So when you're an entrepreneur, where you're working in senior leadership, when things are happening in your industry, there's lots of layoffs coming. I'm a big
Yes,
believer
absolutely.
that everyone should always have a plan for their next act, similar to what you're saying about who is your next team and that point in time.
Hmm.
When you think about the next act for you or as throughout your career,
Yeah.
what have been some of those things that you've thought about, what does tomorrow look like? And how do I plan for that? And how do I get that into some form of plan to action?
Hmm. Well, you hit on a really key message, and in fact, it's one of my signs that you have to, if you haven't defined your next legacy, you
Mhm,
probably need to stay until you do that, what your next plan is. You don't want to be out there just afloat, especially if you're a person like you and I, where we get our energy from doing things. So I actually started my next adventure a year and a half ago, set up a separate LLC. I have been working on developing that plan. I am speaking around the country. I am consulting with businesses. I'm writing my next book. I actually have two jobs right now, but that's great because I love it. But if I didn't do that, I don't think I would be as emotionally prepared to
Mm,
move away from this business. And so, what I love to do, in fact, I just talked to someone yesterday, and she was saying, I know, my plan is a year out. And I said, you need to be planning now. You
mhm,
don't wait until a year from now. And yet, I think it scares people to articulate the fact that they might be thinking of doing something different.
mhm.
And we shouldn't be afraid to do that. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. In fact, I have counseled business owners and I have said to them, your customers and your employees should be comforted by the fact that you are looking ahead, that you are planning, because
Mhm.
you want to make sure that you're going to be able to deliver those services, that the team is ready.
Yeah.
You're taking care of business. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And so I think it's never too early to start planning. In fact, I've said you ought to have an exit strategy from the day you open the doors. Now, it might change, absolutely, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have one. And that plan, I mean, working with people like you, talking to people, thinking about it, mulling it over, you'll know when you're ready.
Yeah.
I know business owners who have said, I'm never selling, and then all of a sudden one day and if they haven't planned, they go home and sit on a couch and are bored.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's you said a word that resonates with me, and the companies I have worked with and talk to all the time. Often people will say, I've got this company, I'm starting it. I want to this is going to be my company. And I ask them, what is your legacy?
Yes.
What is it that you are trying to leave behind? And that's when the conversation begins of, ah, either I hadn't thought about it and now I need to, or this is a company I'm building for generational wealth, or
Mm-hmm.
it's something to help my family grow or teach my kids something, or it could be my business partner and I have done X, Y, and Z, and we have two companies and we're bringing it together. So, all kinds of things. But the legacy question's an interesting one because it's a bit of a formulation of that plan. If you know what you want to be, or you want to leave behind, and well, no one wants to think about not being here. I don't mean it in a death
No, no,
manner. I
no.
mean that it's a story that you can tell. It's a journey. It's something you can share with someone else. But eventually, it is that thing that you leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
When
Well,
you
and
think
and
about
for every person, legacy is different.
yes.
For some people, legacy is leaving a huge sum of money, or creating a foundation, or
Mhm,
their children come into the business.
mhm,
Legacy is really personal, and I know for me, I've thought about this for quite some time, and quite honestly, the thing that has given me such great joy in the last how many years is that I'm able to go out and advocate for small businesses, that I'm able to, I sit on a foundation for a small business, and to be able to pass along what was passed to me, and share that wealth of knowledge, and in a way that, not that I'm trying to guide someone, but sharing my experience so that maybe it informs some of the decisions that they might make. But to me, that the writing, the speaking, the seminars that I do, and just seeing a light bulb go off in somebody's head, is exciting to me. And when you get to a point, where you feel you can do that, when you're first starting your business, that's very hard. You're wearing all these hats. You don't have time to do that. But as you grow the business and people start, you offload some things and you're able to grow your people, then you need to start thinking about what's your next challenge. And I want to just say, I know a business owner, it happens to be my sister, who sold many years ago, and she is sitting on a beach in Florida eating bonbons. And
Mhm.
she is amazing and she is so happy. And her legacy was that her business, there were offshoots of it to employees that started their own small businesses. And now her joy is just in seeing those businesses grow and spending more time with family and doing some traveling. It's create whatever your vision is. It doesn't have to be somebody else's vision, it has to be your vision. What makes you happy?
That is so great because that's exactly what I've been doing. As you know, I've been helping many companies start their businesses, and I do get such joy seeing them grow and fly, and that's amazing. It's so rewarding.
Mhm.
Um, I want to pivot back a little bit to the stay component. When should you stay? So you
Oh,
talked a little bit about, it's at the start, obviously you're going to stay because you're building.
yeah.
But when could there be moments in your business where you think, I should go, but you really shouldn't? You really should stay and see it through. And I think about when not to give up. I think
Yeah.
about when not to face a challenge.
Mhm.
So some business owners, they run when it gets hard, or they shut down, or they pause, or they stall
Mhm.
out. When
Well,
do you make that conscious choice to
yeah,
push?
and I can share with you from the stories I've heard from entrepreneurs. When a business is in crisis, and we all know that we can't predict when these things are going to happen. That's a bad time to leave. I know business owners who have stayed because there was a major change in their business and they needed to help their team navigate that
Mhm,
change and make sure they were on solid ground. I think that is a great reason to stay. I think the other reason that you often want to stay is that you, frankly, that you need the money. I mean, I think it's a reality that we know that many business owners have invested too much in their business.
mhm.
That's their only right sort of source of retirement. And
Yeah.
when they look at it, they need to work for a number of years because maybe they haven't done a good job with, as your father taught you,
Mhm.
the money part of it. So I think that's also a good reason to stay. And I think sometimes you're just not ready. And I don't know how you quantify that. I can tell you that many years ago when there was an interest in buying my business, and the business owner I thought was a wonderful business owner, and I thought he would be great with my team. And I remember sitting in an airport. I had gone to visit them, and I remember sitting in the airport and for no unexplainable reason started to cry because I knew he could do it and I just wasn't ready.
Mhm.
And I felt like I still had gas in the tank. And and yet everyone around me was going, when are you going to retire? And all the people around me were retiring. And I just wasn't ready. And it took some real soul searching for me to say, okay, am I doing this because everyone's pressuring me? We get to a certain age and I get tired of people going, when are you going to retire? Is that why I'm doing it? Or am I doing it because I know it's the best thing for me and for the organization? And at that point, I can tell you, when I looked at it, it was not a good time for me to go. And I'm glad I didn't go. I've been able to do so many things since then. So I think it's really hard for people. And this is why that emotional readiness piece, really understanding why are you doing something?
Mhm.
And looking at, does it still bring you joy? I've interviewed a number of business owners, one in particular. May I mention his name? Because I would love to. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan. He has written international bestseller called Change Friendly Leadership. And he is up in years and he is not going to retire. And I jokingly said to him, really? And he said, why? Why would I leave this thing I love doing? I still love it. And so I'm inspired by him. You know, in his advanced age, he started a podcast. So think about this. He's still doing things that excite him. And there are other business owners that I talk to. But I think asking yourself the questions, and I've developed a whole list of questions that I hope business owners can ask themselves, and then being truthful, you know, not kind of skirting around it, but
Yeah, yeah.
being really truthful. I think the answers become clear. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself.
That's a good point. You've got to be self-aware, be honest with yourself, and give yourself the approval to
Mhm.
write it down. I want to talk a little bit about retirement. So this is I put retirement in quotes because many of the people I work with have retired. They may have had an exit and they don't want to be the CEO in the next vision or iteration of their joy. They're
Sure.
looking for a specific role or just to contribute as a board member or board advisor.
Absolutely.
And I want to touch on your thoughts on ageism in
Mhm.
the workforce as leaders because it comes up a lot where there's a some people think over a certain age
Mhm.
the founders or in particular women are no longer participatory or a good resource. But I do see it with men as well.
Mhm.
However, I'm definitely of the belief that similar to your friend you just mentioned, the doctor, the experience that these leaders have
Sure.
is priceless.
Yeah.
And while they may not want to be a CEO of a company, they do still have valuable experience that we can learn from, and
Mhm.
they can be very useful in different capacities
Oh
in
yeah.
a company. So I would like your thoughts, Cynthia, on how ageism plays out today. What do you see from the founders? You've obviously interviewed thousands of people over
Well, I don't know about thousands, but a lot.
a lot over the years.
Over the years,
Do you
yes,
do you
thousands.
feel perspectives are changing? Do you feel we're still the same? Where do you think we are in this topic?
You know, and I understand that what I'm going to say is anecdotal evidence. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
sure there are studies. What I often hear from individuals and CEOs who have left large companies is that they feel a loss and they are perceived very differently the minute they no longer have an organization behind them. And
Mm,
I find that sad. And part of the reason for that is, you know, over the years we've made a great deal of noise about millennials, right? And how we need to be respectful of younger people. And I'm all for that. I have amazing millennials on my staff and even younger. But I think on the opposite side, we don't talk as much about the ageism. And unfortunately, what we have to do is start to understand that you can't pack that much experience into someone who has not had the years in the business. And yes, some people have a lot of experience early on. But when I look at the CEOs and the people that I know who are sitting on boards or consulting or volunteering their time to organizations like Junior Achievement that helps young people, what I see is a resource there that we need to be celebrating because people have gotten to a point in their life where their goal is to give back. And to not let them do that is, I mean, it's a crime. And yet people will tell me, people used to call me for my advice and they don't anymore. Or the minute I left my job, I was no longer, people weren't answering my phone calls. I don't know how we change that other than we call attention to the fact that there's a lot of brain power out there. And I think we have to really start thinking about how do we use that. There are opportunities for people to do that. One really great example, the Lowe Foundation, which Edward Lowe was the inventor of kitty litter. And he left money to create a foundation for entrepreneurs. And they really value people who are, they call them entrepreneur emeritus. And they try to include these people when they do retreats and when they do all of their programming, because they know how valuable it is to have people who have been in the business world delivering content and being there as a sounding board. So I think they're way ahead of the curve. And I hope that others will do the same.
You touched on something that I think is really important and that we often forget and overlook as we're building our career as leaders. When you're associated with a big brand, it is very easy to almost make the brand become your life and be completely
Mm,
consumed by that to the extent that you forget or for a period of time don't focus on your next act or don't focus on your legacy,
yeah.
and then something happens in the brand, there's a layoff or there's an economic shift and there's a
Yeah.
restructure, and then suddenly you don't have a job and you're
Mhm.
at this screeching halt. What advice would you give to those big brand leaders who are thinking about making a shift, changing the career, or have just completely forgotten to
Mhm.
even think forward and they're just so consumed in the role right now?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you in my early years when I lost my job in broadcasting, that was a big hurdle because when you're on camera every day, people know who you are. And I learned really quickly that I didn't have that ABC affiliate behind my name. And I really had to start to think about, okay, what is it that I can contribute? What is it that is my superpower, right? Because I think everybody's got a superpower. And and really focusing on developing that. And then I also think it's getting outside of the circles that you're in, because sometimes what we don't realize is when we're in that circle of people who know us and they associate us with that brand, we're just canceling out a whole group of people who need to know what we know and will value the fact that we had that experience with that brand, but we also did a lot of that work on our own. And where I found a lot of my very best customers were people who kind of sort of knew my name, but were more concerned about what could I offer them. And so I think developing a really solid offering of what it is you do and really educating yourself on what you can do in the marketplace that is different than other people. I think there's a tendency to be sort of a me too. And so I have often said some people will resonate with the way I work. You talked about my no nonsense as we started. That doesn't work for everyone. So those people will not be good targets for me. But if someone really wants someone who's going to give them a fresh perspective, be honest with them, be a no nonsense person, okay, then they're going to want me. So if these people can think about what is it apart from that brand that is their superpower and lean into that and focus on developing an offering around that, I think they will be successful. I hope.
Yeah, that's great advice. I appreciate that one. That is something we talk a lot about. What is the power? What is it that you offer? I
Mhm.
want to turn to a little bit of another topic, and that's courage. So, courage in business to make those hard decisions, courage in business to make the big decisions. But also, if you're sitting in a brand and you need to leave, or you want to pivot, you said something very important very early on. You wanted to learn or take a new challenge. So, this is not something that you inherently know. It's something different that you want to do and expand your own journey.
Yeah.
How did you find the courage
Mhm.
and how did you come to the realization that this was the next, let's call it building block
Mhm.
in your journey and it was time to move?
Yeah. Well, I would love to tell you that there's a day that you wake up and you have a lucid moment, I love to say, where you know you should do this. Um, I don't think that happens. I think it is more gradual.
Mhm,
Um, and I can tell you that for me, there were things I used to love to do.
mhm,
Um, and and then I got to the point where I didn't love doing them anymore. I still I would do them, um, but I didn't look forward to it.
mhm,
And yet, if you said to me, Cynthia, you want to sit down and write a chapter about this, I was like, I'm all about that. I
mhm,
think it's paying attention to it. And I also think that courage is something that everyone has. We have it to different degrees,
mhm,
but I think you have to do it maybe in baby steps.
mhm,
Maybe it's, I know someone who is at a very large company right now and is considering leaving. And I said to him, perhaps before you do that, is there an opportunity that you can go and do a pilot project or freelance on something over here to see if you really love that? Because
mhm,
if you really love that, then you can start to build a plan about it. You don't have to do it all at once. The famous thing now is the side hustle. Every time I turn around, someone's writing about a side hustle. But a side hustle can be important, especially for people who are considering making a change in their work life.
mhm,
Can you do something part-time to see if it's really that thing that makes you excited and that you're passionate about? Can you wade in a little bit?
mhm,
And then it will give you some direction. I think that's a good way to start, is to try and find some opportunities where you can wade into those things and then paying attention. There's a quote, and I wish I had thought to write it down because I may not get it exactly correct, but it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said something about you must do the thing you think you cannot do. You must look fear in the face and do the thing you think you cannot do. I'll have to, it's probably not exact, but I think about that and I think about there was a woman how many years ago who was talking about, and think about society back there, about having the courage to do something. You you got to dig deep. And if that means surrounding yourself with people who will challenge you to do that, that's another way to do it. People who will encourage you to step out. I think I was very blessed in that when I started the business, even though I never would have done this, my dad said, go for it. Go for it, do what's in your heart. He also said, do you know what you're getting into? I went, yes, I do, Dad. I do.
yeah, right.
I've been watching you, so I do know. But, but I also knew that what was the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen was I could fail. Well, all right, I fail and I have to go and get another job, or I have to go and start another business. Why are we so afraid to fail? I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. And I think we all do. We don't like to talk about it, but I certainly haven't done it all right. I've hired people that were bad choices. You know, I've invested time in projects I shouldn't have invested in. The sad part is if you don't learn about it, but don't be afraid to fail. Fail fast. If you're going to fail, go ahead and fail. But I think the sad part would be the courage to not try it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a big believer in fail fast, fail
Mm-hmm.
forward, fail fast, but get yourself up, dust yourself off, don't fail the same way again. Continue to fail,
Mm-hmm.
but be honest with yourself and learn from it.
Yeah.
So thinking about that structure of failing fast and
Mm-hmm.
going back to those maybe looking to pivot from in their business or
Mm-hmm.
from the corporate world or from another life situation. I'm of the belief that there is no time like the present to take a chance. It's never too late
Yeah.
to start a business, launch an idea, join a board, give back. What would you tell people who are maybe tired of eating bonbons on the beach and maybe thinking, there's got to be something more for me?
Yeah.
What would you tell them to do at any time, and how would they plan that next act?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. One of the entrepreneurs that I interviewed recently started the business in her 60s.
There you go.
She is now in her 70s
Mm-hmm.
and is not planning to retire. Skinny teas, wonderful woman who gives back to her community and has built a wonderful business. Um, I think, you can't give someone the courage to do something. So to some degree, I'm going to be no nonsense here. I'm going to say, suck it up and do it. If you've been thinking about it for a long time, why are you still thinking? It's time to make the move,
Yep.
put some things in place and see what you can do. But I also think that by not moving or not making a pivot in your career, perhaps you are happy where you are. Maybe that's not what's wrong in your life. Maybe you need to go find a great hobby that you love or something else. But I think when people become paralyzed, it's one of two things. They either don't have the courage to do it or they really aren't as unhappy as they say they are. And I think it's important to define that. And sometimes they're on the fence, and I understand that. But if you ask what was my biggest mistake, my biggest mistake was I should have started my business 5 to 10 years earlier. I was ready. I should have done it, but I didn't have that little push to do it. And that's why now when I'm looking at launching new initiatives or when I'm looking at going after something, I take it head on. I think it's important to go with direction. And then if you're wrong, you're wrong. Can always change it, right?
That is right. You can always change it. If it's not quite right, pivot,
Pivot. Absolutely.
pivot. But you will always find the right answer in the end. We always do. We
Mhm.
never truly fail in life. We always end up in the place we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I believe that.
So you're writing, or you've just launched your latest book, and you're
Yeah.
writing a new book.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the books and the why, and why was it important to put down your amazing story?
Yeah. Well, so back in 2014, I wrote the Stop Wishing, Stop Whining, Start Leading.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that was, and it was aimed specifically at women. And part of the reason that I thought that was an important book is because I started my business at a time when women didn't own businesses, and
Mhm.
particularly not media businesses.
Yeah.
And when people ask like who were your role models, I jokingly go, there weren't any because there weren't that many women business owners. And yet today what I find is we often find excuses for why we are not successful.
Hmm.
And So certainly there are market conditions, and certainly there are glass ceilings, and there are things that are barriers that people put in our way. But there are also barriers that we put in our own way as
Mm.
women. And we need to own up to that. So that was part of the reason I wrote that book. The book that I released in 2024 in May, Small Business, Big Success, Proven Strategies to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business. And part of the reason I did that was I was finding that people were taking the business world and were looking at it in little slices. Here's how
Mhm.
you market well. Here's how you grow well. Here's how you exit well. And what I think is you've got to look at that whole continuum. So I
Yes.
looked at what's success at startup, because even if you're a mature business, you're always starting something up, right?
Yeah.
So you're still a startup. What's success at operations? What's success at growth? What's success at stepping out and into your next adventure? So that book kind of set the stage for the one that I'm currently writing, hope to release it soon, which really focuses on what we've been talking about today. And the reason I think it's important is that I think sometimes we discount the fact that if we just pay attention
Mhm.
to not only the business, but how we emotionally feel about what we're doing, the end result is better for everyone. And I believe that.
I think that is so true. And I'm sure right now the audience is feeling relief, excitement,
Oh, I hope so.
enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So, as this audience is going to look at this and say, how do I get in touch with Cynthia? What is the best way that they can get in touch with you? Or how can they get copies of your book? Where is it
Well,
that you put
so
on
it's
it?
on Amazon. So look up Cynthia K, but Cynthia KAYBIZ biz.com. Or you can certainly email me at cynthia@thinkck.com. And I always say to people, and I honestly and truly mean this, I always find time for an entrepreneur. Maybe not right at the moment they ask for it, but I'm excited to have people. Some of the best stories I've gotten and the people that I've interviewed have come from the connections that I have made with people. And sometimes they help me and sometimes I help them. I mean, I was so delighted when we got connected by someone who thought we ought to meet.
Yeah,
And to me, I mean, that's exciting. And I really do believe that when you're in the business world, no one can give you better advice than another business person. They can share what they have experienced. Might not be quite right for you, but they can give you some insight. So relying on our peers, it's really critical.
I agree. And sharing opportunities and discussing and helping everyone grow. We're all so grateful for what you've given today, but you've given
Oh,
so much over the years. So thank you. And
thank
thank you for
you.
being uh, a great guest on my show, but also a very good friend. Thank you so much,
Well,
Cynthia. It's been my
thank you.
pleasure to host you today.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity, because I think what you're doing is just amazing. So, and I look forward to us connecting many more times.
Likewise. Thank you.